Hello, welcome. Namaste, everybody. I bow in reverence to those of you joining me in the room, to those of you joining me on Zoom, and to those of you listening to the recording afterwards. Welcome to Living from the Heart, a Dharma talk all about this extraordinary journey of 18 inches, which can often take many lifetimes simply to travel from the head to the heart. I like to start with a poem of my own as a lead-in to this week's topic. We'll follow with a short meditation to integrate what we've talked about. And finally, we'll save some time at the end for question and answer. And our topic for this week is on our longing to belong. And today's poem is called We. We marks the transition from illness to wellness. We are present, alive, and trying our best. We are together at this moment. Extraordinary forces and possibility have brought us here today. We are together here in the pain and the joy, the sweat and the tears. We are here together on this earth, in heat and cold, disasters and wonders. We are here together on this earth to wake up, to be mirrors to each other, reflecting our own illumination even when our lives have darkened. We are together here on this earth to wake up. Here on this earth, we are. So it's the feeling and sense of we that shifts us from illness to wellness. And the big reason for that is that as human beings, we all long to belong. The desire for connection, acceptance, and belonging is one of the deepest human needs that we have. Hafiz wrote this: admit something. Everyone you see, you say to them, love me. Of course, you do not do this out loud, otherwise someone would call the cops. Still, though, think about this great pull in us to connect. Why not become the one who lives with a full moon in each eye that is always saying, with that sweet moon language, what every other eye in the world is dying to hear? So the deepest human need is to belong. The deepest human need is to be loved and to love. And before we even go deeper into this topic, it is incredibly important to note that if you yourself are feeling disconnected, if you yourself do not have a sense of belonging, that's normal, especially in today's world. We live in an incredibly disconnected world. Sociologists would agree we are currently in a loneliness epidemic. Although in theory, we are more connected than ever before through our technology and through our devices, our subjective experience of connection is lacking. We subjectively feel ourselves to be more lonely than ever before because we don't have that authentic and real connection. With each subsequent generation of humanity, we socialize less, we have less close friends, less people that we can confide in about our deepest emotional troubles, and less people that we can reach out to when we need people the most. We go out less. We spend less time outside and with each other. We have less companions. The etymology for companion is kun pan, meaning with bread, meaning people that we can break bread with. And this is absolutely an epidemic, which is why the practice of yoga, the practice of linking together, joining together, and connecting is the medicine that this world needs now more than ever. So, when we talk about this disconnection that we are all feeling, we are disconnected from almost every aspect of human experience. The average person is, first of all, living from the shoulders up, lost in our own thought, endlessly ruminating in their own minds. So, really, the first step in our practice is to come back to our bodies, to start to live below the shoulders, to get in touch with our breath, in touch with our hearts, and in touch with our bodies, and to feel our feet on this earth. We are disconnected from each other in our increasingly atomized society, where we have been largely set up to be an isolated individual in this world. We are less connected to extended families, to extended friendship, to brotherhood, and to sisterhood. And finally, we are disconnected to this world, the natural world, nature, which we have evolved to live in. We don't spend time in the woods, in the fields, in the grasslands. We spend time largely in man-made environments as we go from our house to the car, to the subway, to the office building. We don't spend time connecting to this earth that supports us. Even our food that we eat is highly processed. It barely even resembles a plant that came from this earth. And we don't even know where our food came from, and rarely even feel our feet or hands in the earth that grows our food on a daily basis. So, coming back to connection and a sense of belonging is a key part of our spiritual practice. Brene Brown put it this way: true belonging is the spiritual practice of believing in and belonging to yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self with the world and find sacredness in both being a part of something and standing alone in the wilderness. True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. And this is a lesson on the spiritual path that we find again and again and again. Step one, know who you are. Step two, be who you are. Our path is one of self-discovery, cultivating self-awareness to attain self-realization, which can often take extraordinary effort in order to get there. But once we do become awake to our own true nature, then we are able to rest in it. Then we are able to be it. It takes a long time to attain an inner peace. But then once we find it, we can maintain it, we can stay with it, and we can stay rooted and connected to it. There's a story. The names in this story are always kind of crack me up. All his life, Pfeffer wanted a tailored suit. Finally, at the age of 65, he went to go get himself one. After getting measured, he went to go pick up his suit. He tried it on and looked at himself in the mirror. He could not believe how elegant he looked. One more thing, said his tailor, Klein. You have a little scoliosis. Maybe you didn't know, but your right shoulder droops. I did what I could to correct for it, but there's only so much I can do. If you really want the suit to look good, you'll have to hoist your right shoulder a little bit. So Pfeiffer hoists his right shoulder. One more thing, said the tailor. Your right leg, maybe you didn't know, is about an eighth of an inch shorter than your left. I did what I could to correct for it, but you don't want too much material on one side compared to the other side. So if you just straighten your right leg and bend your left leg a little, It'll fall perfectly. So Pfeffer straightens his right leg and bends his left leg. One final thing, says the tailor. Because you are bending one leg and straightening the other, the crotch area is a little off balance. So if you tilt your knees out a little bit, there. Perfect. Pfeffer leaves and exits out onto 48th Street. He walks down the block with one shoulder up, one leg straight, one leg bent, and both of his knees bowed out. He passes by two men. One says, "Oh my, do you see that horribly crippled man? He must have been in a terrible industrial accident." It's pretty rough. He must have been in a terrible industrial accident. "Yes," says the other, "but what a beautiful suit he's wearing." And I think many of us resonate with this story that in order to feel like we fit in order to present ourselves in such a way that society deems acceptable or that society values, we have to contort and force ourselves into that shape that we fundamentally weren't meant to fit into. So we put on a face and we put on a suit, although inside we might feel broken and crooked and awkward, we still put on this artificial persona, this artificial front, in order to look good to the world, in order to be accepted and valued by others. So, this again is a natural human experience. We all have social brains. We have evolved to connect with each other because evolutionarily, we grew up to be in tribes and we had to depend on others in order to survive. So, exclusion from the group was threatening to our survival. So we always will be thinking about what do I need to do in order to be accepted by my larger tribe. So neuroscientists has even found that there's a functioning of our brain that they call the default mode network. And the default mode network is a general description of where the mind goes when it's not doing anything else. So after you've completed a set of tasks and you simply sit down and your mind's like, okay, what program am I going to run while not much is happening in the environment, while we'll not focus on any particular task? And the default mode network is that program that is run when we're not doing anything in particular. And there is an incredible overlap between our default mode network and the same parts of the brain that focus on social relationships. In other words, the mind, when it's not doing anything else, is going to sit there and worry about social connection and belonging. And we see this. We see this all the time. You know, as soon as we see an old friend that we haven't seen for a long time, the first thing that we want to hear is the gossip. The first thing that we want to hear is the scoop. Tell me about the social relationships that you are a part of that I need to be caught up on. Who is dating who? Who just broke up? Who said what to whom? We want to know what is happening most in our social relationships because that is how our brain is wired to think. So, because our need for love is the deepest human desire, lack of love or threatening of a lack of love or a rejection of love is the deepest human suffering. And much of our emotions have evolved in order to motivate us, in theory, in order to bring ourselves some level of discomfort so that we do seek connection and so that we do seek belonging, or so that we change our behavior in order to be socially accepted into the group. So, the emotion of guilt, for example, is a belief that we did something wrong, that we did something potentially wrong that is potentially going to ostracize us from the group, which is going to be threatening to our own survival. So if guilt is the belief that we did something wrong, shame is the belief that we are wrong, that there is something deeply wrong about who we are that we need to hide, that we have to contort in order to put on that suit, in order to face the social group that we want to belong to. So this is how our human brain is wired. Both guilt and shame carry the weight of rejection and isolation. And I remember a recent spirited debate I had with a therapist friend of mine about whether or not shame could potentially be useful. And a huge reason for this is I do come from a meditative and contemplative background, and also a trauma-informed background that essentially says there is no such thing as a wrong feeling. There is no objectively wrong feeling. It is the mind that labels things as good or bad, primarily depending on whether or not it serves the ego or does not. But all of our emotions are really important messengers. They're there to teach us something. If we have a boundary that is crossed, it's natural to feel angry as a result. And that anger is telling you that you have a boundary that was just violated by another human being. So, in the contemplative tradition, there is this term called positive sadness. And this comes from Dzgar Kongtrul Rinpoche. Sorry if I butchered that Tibetan pronunciation. And the idea behind positive sadness is that all suffering in our life can be metabolized and digested and used for greater good and understanding. So, for example, if you were to do an action that harmed another human being, that created suffering in another human being, that feeling of guilt is a messenger that you did do something that caused harm. And if we use that message as a lesson that it's not right to cause harm to other human beings, and in order to make this wrong action right, we can A, make amends with the other human being, B, resolve to never cause the suffering of other human beings ever again, and C, recognize that as a human being, we all make mistakes. And sometimes we even unintentionally hurt other people, even though we might have had the best of intentions. So, this is why we say no mud, no lotus. We cannot have the blissful light of our own awakening without suffering in our lives. But the interesting thing about no mud, no lotus is that life will present suffering to you. And what matters is how you use it. You could get mud on your face, you could drown in mud. But are you going to use it for the greater good? Are you going to metabolize it and digest it for the greater good? Because fundamentally, when you do look at Eastern traditions, there isn't the harsh judgment of right and wrong that you most commonly see in the West, primarily from Judeo Christian values, that does view our actions through the lens of God, that judges these things as inherently good or inherently bad. In the East, it's very different. Things aren't good or bad. There are actions that create suffering and actions that alleviate suffering. And we should always be moving towards actions that alleviate suffering and reducing our own propensity to actions that create suffering. So it's much more of a kind of secular ethics. Things that are good are those that alleviate suffering and create happiness in sentient beings, and things that are bad are things that create suffering in other sentient beings. So, from this perspective, something like guilt or shame is a very natural thing to experience if we have created suffering in other human beings. If we have created suffering in our communities, we might have a little bit of positive sadness, a little bit of shame that we did something wrong. And if we are able to use that shame, we can do actions to repair what harm we did and to better connect to our community and to learn from the experience. So Pema Chodron says, we can admit to ourselves that out of ignorance we've done harm without getting caught in the storylines about bad me. And that's key. That is another part of our meditative practice is to not get so caught up in our storylines, to recognize very quickly that we did something that caused suffering, and now we should repair that connection and help to alleviate the suffering of other human beings. But then there becomes a bit of a challenge when such Eastern ideals do shift to the Western mindset, which can be very harsh and very judgmental of human beings just for who they are. So when I was talking to this therapist friend, they were saying shame is never good. We have slut shaming, sex shaming, fat shaming. And then it occurred to me that, yes, in our extremely individualistic and judgmental world, we have sort of internalized a sense of shame for who somebody is. Certain sexualities have been deemed to be shameful for centuries in Western culture. So we do have to acknowledge that many of the things that our modern society and culture says that we should be shameful about is a false narrative, that we can let go of that and let go of this idea that something is wrong with us. And at the same time, use other evidence of our actions to commit ourselves to alleviate the suffering of all beings. So, all that is to say that we all long to belong. And our spiritual practice, our spiritual task is to find belonging. And fortunately, we don't need to go anywhere. We can find belonging right here and right now. When the Zen master Nansen Fugen was asked what kind of practice would be best, he replied, if you seek for it, you will only go in the wrong direction. So, this is the most important part about belonging. It is a matter of coming home, coming back home. It is, in fact, a return. C.S. Lewis wrote this: the sweetest thing in all my life has been the longing to reach the mountain, to find the place where all the beauty came from. My country, the place where I ought to have been born. Do you think it all meant nothing? All the longing for home? For indeed, it now feels not like going, but like going back. And this is our longing. We're longing to go back. We're longing to return home. We're longing to discover our true nature, which has been there all the time. We simply have forgotten. So we are longing to remember. So our first task is to first come home to our bodies, these living, breathing, walking, sitting, standing, and dancing bodies. John O'Donohue put it this way: our bodies know they belong. It is our minds that make our lives so homeless. So we are here to come back to our bodies, to rest in our bodies, to smile at our body and let our body smile back. And when we do look at any of those embodiment practices, whether it's yoga or Tai Chi or Qi Gong, it's always a matter of slowing down, because the mind will always race from one thing to the next and to the next. But the body moves at its own pace, and it moves quite slowly. So we do have to slow down the mind in order to come home back to the body. So in our beginning meditation, when I had you look at where does the mind go when it wanders off, you might notice a lot of thoughts arising from the default mode network. Oh, is there something I need to do? Some relationship I need to fix? Is there something I need to change about myself? Is there something that is wrong with me that I need to change in order to belong with my tribe, village, or community? This is a very common thought. Our mind will drift away and create resistance from what is happening in the here and now. But it's this body that is always sensing, feeling, breathing, touching in the intersection of here and now. And we are here to come back home to our bodies, to remember what it's like to be in our bodies. Thomas Merton wrote this: what can we gain by sailing to the moon if we are not able to cross the abyss that separates us from ourselves? And it's such an interesting inquiry. How am I separate from myself? What parts of myself have I pushed and set aside? And when we look into shame, again, there are parts of our personality, parts of our desires that we have pushed out off to the side in order to be accepted to the larger group. But at the same time, when we are caught up in our own thoughts and our own mind, we are not getting in touch with our bodies. And the general rule of thumb is the reason we're not present to this moment is because we are resisting it, because we are wanting things to be different, because we are often running away from exactly what is happening in the here and now. So, a huge reason we aren't present in our bodies is because we don't accept them and all of their changes and fine print and problems that come up when we do get in touch with our bodies. So, really, the first step to coming home to our bodies is practicing one of acceptance, accepting exactly who we are and where we are in the here and the now, which is something that's not easy to do because it will require us to sit with discomfort, something that our immediate satisfaction society does not encourage. If you're hungry, get something to eat. If you're thirsty, get something to drink. If you have a headache, take a pill. We are encouraged to sit with any level of discomfort. So that becomes a problem when we encounter inevitable suffering in our life where there is no solution, there is no running or escaping, and we haven't yet cultivated the qualities of presence that allow us to be there during the times that we can't fix with an easy solution like we do have when we are hungry, thirsty, or have a headache. So Thich Nhat Hanh says this: if you can accept your body, then you have a chance to see your body as your home. You can rest in your body, settle in, relax, and feel joy and ease. If you don't accept your body and your mind, you can't be at home with yourself. You have to accept yourself as you are. This is a very important practice. As you practice building a home in yourself, you become more and more beautiful. So, some really incredible things happen when we come into the body. First off, we get in touch with a deeper wisdom. I love this term gut feeling because it implies that other parts of our body are also processing the information in our lives and feeding us messages of what to do in that situation. So the stomach is even sometimes referred to as the second brain because our body is always sending us signals about the best way to move forward with any situation in our life. We generally refer to the messages that the body sends us as intuition, this underlying gut feeling that this is the best way to go about a situation. So we get in touch with a gut feeling and our intuition, and we also get in touch with our own hearts. which is also in our bodies. So, as we are coming to a sense of belonging, as we are coming back home to the body, we can also come back home to our hearts. I love the phrase, home is where the heart is, because where is your heart? Inside of you. Therefore, where is your home? Also inside of you. So, verse 348 of the Dhammapada says this: let go of that which is in front, let go of that which is already gone, and let go of the in between. With a heart that takes hold nowhere, you arrive at the place beyond all suffering. And this is the incredible thing about our bodies. We take them everywhere we go. Therefore, we can rely on our bodies to be there. We can rely on our hearts to be there. Everything in this external world is changing and impermanent. So, therefore, there is nothing in this external world that we can fundamentally rely on for a lasting sense or feeling of peace, joy, and happiness. But what is always there? The heart beating in our own chest. What is always there while we are alive in this body? Our breath. So, this is something that we can rely on, the heart inside and our breath inside, at least for this period of time that we are in our physical bodies. So, our coming home is a return. We come home to the body, home to the heart. And we can also find a sense of belonging with our Sangha. So, almost all spiritual and religious practices know and encourage the importance of community, the importance of Sangha. In Buddhism, there are the three refuges: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha is your own awakened nature, which is always there. It's an untouched diamond available for discovery anytime that you are ready to find it. Then we have the Dharma, the teachings, both the Buddha Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha themselves, but also the teachings of the world that is always here, the teaching of the heart, the teaching of our body, and the teaching of the sun as it shines. And then we have the Sangha, the community, that none of us can do this alone, that we are all here to support each other. Sometimes these are called the three refuges. Sometimes these are called the three jewels. So our Sangha is a pure jewel that just brings light and love and support to our life. So as we are looking for greater belonging in our life, we can also look towards the Sangha. The poet Windleberry wrote this: come into the life of the body, the one body granted to you in all history of time. Come into the body's economy, its daily work, and its replenishment at mealtimes and at night. Come into the body's thanksgiving, when it knows and acknowledges itself a living soul. Come into the dance of community, joined in a circle, hand in hand, the dance of the eternal love of women and men for one another, and of neighbors and friends for one another. So it's so important to recognize that we're all in this together, that we are not different human races. We are one human race tied together through a mutual brotherhood and sisterhood. And a true Sangha does not require us to change any aspect of who we are in order to find a sense of belonging. Because a true Sangha does not discriminate on the surface level differences and judgments and criticism that society often does. A Sangha connects people at the soul level, SOUL level. John O'Donohue again put it this way: To be human is to belong. Belonging is a circle that embraces everything. If we reject it, we damage our nature. The word belonging holds together the two fundamental aspects of life, being and longing, the longing of our being and the being of our longing. Belonging is deep. Only in a superficial sense does it refer to our external attachment to people, places, and things. It is the living and passionate presence of the soul. Belonging is the heart and warmth of intimacy, and when we deny it, we grow cold and empty. Our life's journey is the task of refining our belonging so that it may become more true, loving, good, and free. We do not have to force belonging. The longing within us always draws us towards belonging, and again towards new forms of belonging when we have outgrown the old ones. Postmodern culture tends to define identity in terms of ownership, possession, status, and qualities. Yet the crucial essence of who you are is not owned by you. True belonging is gracious receptivity. This is the appropriate art of belonging in friendship. Friends do not belong to each other, but rather with each other. This with reaches to the very depths of their twinned souls. So I think we'll have to do part two of belonging next week because I also wanted to talk about what it truly means to belong to this earth and what it might mean to discover a sense of belonging with the divine. Because everything is intimately connected. If we want to cultivate our love for someone else, we must understand the fundamental essence of love is our attention. It is the most rarest and purest form of generosity. If you want to actually be there for somebody, you actually have to be there, which is here. You want to be a shoulder to lean on, an ear to listen, and a heart that is receptive and can hold somebody in all of their beingness. So we are here to be together, to practice being together, to acknowledge within each and every one of us there is a deep longing to belong, a longing to connect. So, recognizing this longing, we can be there for each other. It is the most precious gift we have to offer, our own attention. And a key part of the spiritual path is recognizing all of the obstacles that get in the way. Most of the sacred texts are focused on the internal obstacles of the kleshas, which is can also be translated as neuroses, our own sort of mental habits and conditioning, the anger, the envy, the jealousy, the ill will. These can all also act as obstacles to true belonging and being there for each other. But especially in today's world, we have to recognize today's culture, today's society in of itself presents all sorts of obstacles that will also get in the way. The biggest one, of course, is the diversion of our attention. Along with being in a loneliness epidemic, we are also in an attention epidemic. Our attention is getting pulled in every which direction by the continuous influx of sensory information in the form of our media and our devices. And nowadays, when a couple falls asleep next to each other, they spend hours before they fall asleep gently staring into and stroking their own phone. So this world presents so many distractions, and it's up to us, it's up to all of us to put down the distractions and to cultivate a presence that we can bring to any situation in our lives. So that is exactly what we are here to do. That is why we notice the mind when it gets distracted and bring it back to the here and to the now so that we can be here and now for ourselves and be here for each other. So as we close out, let us again return, remember, recollect ourselves, body, heart, mind united together. As you notice the breath, smile at the breath. As you notice the body, smile at the body. And our first task to being there for others is to be there for ourselves. So take one hand to the heart, and we can treat ourselves the way we would a good friend, saying to ourselves, darling, I am here for you. And if there is some challenges in your life, some pain or suffering in your life, you can add, darling, I know that you are suffering, and that is why I am here for you. Darling, I am here for you. I know that you are suffering, and that is why I am here for you. And as we notice inside of ourselves this longing for connection and belonging, and the warmth that naturally arises when we do feel a sense of connection and belonging, we can recognize this need in each and every human being. And in our commitment to alleviate the suffering of all sentient beings, let us all be that warm, kind, compassionate, empathetic, and understanding presence for each other, letting each of us be a mirror to the other, reflecting back the inherent goodness, the secret beauty, the awakened nature, the compassionate heart that lies within. Come into the life of the body, the one body granted to you in all the history of time. Come into the body's economy, its daily work, and its replenishment at mealtimes at night. Come into the body's thanksgiving when it knows and acknowledges itself a living soul. Come into the dance of community, joined in circle, hand in hand, the dance of the eternal love of women and men for one another, and of neighbors and friends for one another. May we all find a sense of connection and belonging in this sacred dance. May we find an overwhelming sense of love for every other sentient being in this intimate, connected dance of brotherhood and sisterhood, of women for one another, of men for one another, of friends, family, and neighbors for one another. Namaste.